Welcome to another Swordmaster Publications presentation. My name is Ernie Lawrence. Today we'll be studying Judges chapter 16. This is the last chapter that we're going to look at Samson, and I think this is the chapter where we get more into alignment with a lot of the teachings about Samson that we typically get about him being somebody who has fallen, somebody who allows the plan that he had been given up to this point to kind of overtake him, where before he had been doing things to take on the Philistines, to agitate them, to get them to fight him and to focus on him, where he could take them out. To now, he kind of gives in to that uh, subterfuge a little bit, and he allows it to overcome him, and he ends up falling and eventually dying because of it. Uh, I still hold, and I think that I've shown plenty of evidence that originally what all was going on was something that Samson was doing with the Lord's approval, that he was judging Israel, that he was standing against the Philistines in a way that God was giving him strength through the entire thing. Uh, and it's not until we get to 16 that we begin to see these things kind of fall apart for Samson. And so we're gonna cover that today. We'll cover, it's a very familiar story. It's not like I'm going over something that people don't know about, but maybe just a little bit different perspective of where he's at in his life when he gets here. Note that up until this time, Samson has been judging Israel. That he, all the way from the beginning of his time, when he first went down to Timnah with the lady there, who was eventually killed by her own people, that began the time of his judgment. And so for 20 years, he's been judging Israel. He's been protecting them from the Philistines and kind of causing havoc for the Philistines or whatever. So this is now towards the end of that 20-year period where he has been faithfully doing God's will. Uh, but we're going to see that things are not. He kind of wavers in that faithfulness here towards the end, and that can happen. That can happen to anybody. You serve in a certain position, and there's a lot of stress. There's a lot of things that you have to deal with, and if you aren't allowing someone to bear that burden with you, and I will just give you an example: the idea of eldership, the leader of a congregation. I think that one of the reasons that God requires a plurality of elders over a congregation is that it is a very difficult position to hold. The very souls of the members of that congregation are your responsibility. And for one man to handle that on his own is, uh, it's too much. It's too much of a burden to bear all alone. And that's where we find Samson here, is that he's been bearing this burden alone as the judge, instead of doing like a lot of the others. They had armies, they had their 300 men like Gideon. They have these people that have come with them and been there with him to help shoulder that burden. Samson is by himself. He never does an army thing. He doesn't have a group. The 30 friends that he had from Philistia were obviously false friends. He never truly considered them as friends. They were just part of the plan. So now that stress is built up, and this is not to excuse his actions. We make our choices, and Samson makes some bad choices here. Um, but it's, I think part of that is that he does not ever go in and find a woman from Israel to actually settle down and marry and fall in love with. I think he's a loner. He does it by himself, and that's ultimately, I think, what his downfall is. Because if he had eventually, in those 20 years that he was judging, found a woman of Israel to marry, to truly be married to, and not just some plan with the Philistines, that he would have lived a lot longer. This would not have been how things ended for him. So here we have, it says, then went Samson to Gaza and saw there a harlot and went in unto her. Okay, so this is right away. We're starting here. Samson goes into this harlot. We know what that means. Um, he is now committing sin because of going into this harlot. He is now beginning his downfall, and we're going to see that this is going to cascade into allowing the women that he is supposed to be using to get to the Philistines and manipulate the Philistines are now going to get to him. And so he goes into this harlot, and it was told the Gazites, saying, Samson has come here. And they compassed him in and laid wait for him all night at the gate of the city, and were quiet all night, saying, in the morning, when it is day, we will kill him. So they wait for him. They know that he's in with a harlot. And it may be that Samson was just there to do the thing that he normally did. But it says he went in unto her. That phrase, when we see it in other places, like when we talk about Jacob going in unto Leah or unto Rachel or unto the handmaidens or whatever, that phrase is almost always exclusively meaning that he did things with her, not just that he was there um, to stir up the Philistines like we had seen before with the women that he had done things with before. So, but anyway, the plan is still there. The Samson is there to mess with the Philistines like he had been doing, and you can see this by the way that the Gazites, the Philistines in Gaza, react. They're constantly looking for a way to waylay Samson and take him out. And so when they hear that he had come into this place to this harlot, that's what they do. They surround him and they're going to try to kill him. And it never works. In 20 years, it hasn't worked. And you figure they'd figure it out. But it says that Samson lay until midnight and arose at midnight. So they're waiting till day to take him out. But he arises at midnight and he takes the doors of the gate of the city. So imagine you have this walled city and you have the gate of the city. It's a big, huge gate that opens up and allows like wagons and horses and all kinds of stuff to come in. But when those are closed, there's a door to the gate. It's a smaller door. He takes the doors of the gate of the city and the two posts, and he basically just lifts them up and takes them, bar and all. Like he just picks them up. He's that strong. Put them on his shoulders and carried them to the top of the hill that is before Hebron. So he kind of makes his escape here, but it's not really him trying to get away. It's him messing with them. He's taunting the Philistines, and he does this, and what he's doing is he's breaking down the defenses of their city by taking out the gates, the doors into the city. Now, not the big gates, but the doors into the city. He is allowing anybody to come in and take the city. That's what he's doing. He's taunting the people here by taking this and making it possible to get in to the city. So this is kind of the last time that he does what he has always been doing, where he will go into the Philistine territory and there'll be a woman involved. In this case, I think he messes up, but he is still, his strength is still with him. God is still with him because that's part of the plan for him to go in and mess with the Philistines and taunt them and get them to attack him. So he does this and he takes it to the top of the hill and kind of like a trophy, puts it there or whatever. And so that kind of ends that story. That section is over with. Now we go to verse 4, and it says, and it came to pass afterward that he loved a woman in the valley of Sorek, whose name was Delilah. And what I see here in this verse is that he's still continuing on with the tactic. He's going in, he's finding some woman in the Philistine territory, and what he's doing, I think, is building up this this tactic that gets the Philistines used to what he's doing. Like they know the pattern, and he's using that pattern to taunt them. So every time he goes into Philistia, he will develop a relationship with a woman, and I think he's been doing this for 20 years. He'll develop a relationship, and they know that he'll develop a relationship with a woman, and they will try to get the woman to mess with Samson. We saw it with the first woman in Timnah, and now we're seeing it here with Delilah. And in every case, Samson ends up taking out more Philistines. He's killing more of these people that attack him because he is provoking them in a way that if they would have just left him alone, he would have had no justification to take them out. But they don't. They come and they try to waylay him and attack him and kill him. And so he's just doing this. This is almost kind of like a Batman type uh, situation where Batman kind of inserts himself into places where if the bad guys didn't attack him, Batman wouldn't have the justification for self defense to take them all out. And so I think Samson is doing the same thing. But this time, when he goes into the woman to develop this relationship, as he has always been doing, this woman, Delilah, he actually falls in love with her. And that is his downfall, is that he is now actually in love with this foreign woman, where before I don't think he actually was in love with any of the women. They were just a means to an end. And I think that now he's falling in love with this woman, and that's going to spell his doom. So she is in the valley of Sorek. If you look here, I've got a map up for this. Up here in the north area, this is all the kind of like the Judah. This is the southern area, kind of to the west. You can see Bethlehem down here. Some of the other places. Well, I don't know if it'll scroll out for me. Nope, it's not going to. But anyway, you could see some of these other places. This is heading to the southern border of Israel. You got the Sea of Galilee right here. But over here in the Gaza Strip, and here's the bigger map. Here's the Gaza Strip right here. This is heading over to Egypt. I believe this is called the River of Egypt here, if I remember correctly. This is the southern border, the absolute southern border of Israel. But this river here leads to this valley of Sorek, and Sorek it means the choice vines. So this was a very fertile valley, and there was a lot of, you can see all the green here. This is a very fertile valley, being so close to the sea. It's got mountains. You can see the river coming down from the mountain, flowing to the sea. So this is very fertile, and here they're growing all of these grapes, and a lot of people will talk about how Samson was a Nazarite, and he kind of tempted himself by going into these places where they served wine. I don't think that's the case. That we don't ever actually see him drinking. We don't actually ever see him eating grapes or touching the vines, and he's always got his strength. So this vow, this Nazarite vow that he's supposed to have had since his birth, that he'll talk about here in a minute, he's kept it this whole time because God gives him his strength the entire time. I think that what we're seeing is that this is the plenty of the promised land. We're seeing a place flowing with milk and honey. We're seeing a place that is full of these grapes and they're the luxury items that we see in this area, that are supposed to be the children of Israel's, but they didn't push the Philistines out when they should have, and so now they're this thorn in their side the whole time. But I believe, based on what we read, because we can't go beyond what's written, I believe that what we're seeing here is that he's just going to a place that happens to be fairly wealthy, and it's because of the plenty of the grapes here in this valley. There is nothing in this text that says that he actually drank wine or that he was participating in anything related to the grapevine. That it just doesn't say it. so we can't we can't read that out of it. But in other words, he loved a woman in the valley of Sorek whose name was Delilah, and the Lord of the Philistines came up unto her and said unto her, entice him and see where his great strength lies. So now they got a new tactic. So now before they were just kept trying to fight him and to surprise him and to waylay him. They were trying the standard ways of doing it, but now they have finally come to recognize his great strength is his, like, that's his weapon, that's his advantage over them. And so instead of trying to just manhandle him, they go in and they use the woman again to try to figure it out or whatever. This time they're not trying to trick her to get her to reveal a riddle. They're actually trying to get him to reveal his where his strength comes from. Why is he so strong? Now, what would have been interesting is that if he didn't actually have a strength, like if he had a like his strength was just he had it and there wasn't anything part, what were they gonna do? His strength was a strength, it wouldn't matter what they did to him. But his strength was then tied to, and this is where I say that he never had any grapes or wine or anything, is his strength was tied to that Nazarite vow, which part of that was he would never shave his head. And so uh, they're going in, they say, where does his great strength lie? And by what means may we prevail against him, that we may bind him to afflict him, that they're going to torture him. All of the problems that he's caused over these 20 years, they don't want to just capture him. They don't want to just kill him. They want to torture him. And we will give you, every one of us, 1,100 pieces of silver. So these are the lords of the Philistines. These are the leaders. And there's many of them. And every one of them is going to give her 1,100 pieces of silver. That is a fortune. This woman is going to be rich. Now, we aren't told how Delilah feels about Samson. We know that he loves her, and it may be that at first she loved him. It may also be that she was just enamored with him. So he was a mighty man, very muscular. Um, it could be that she knew exactly who he was and knew that he was there for taking out her people. It's totally possible. We just don't know. We have no idea how Delilah felt about him. However she felt about him, 1,100 pieces of silver from each and every lord of the Philistine was enough to be greater than whatever she felt for him. If she had any kind of love or feelings for him at all, it wasn't as worth as much as 1,100 pieces of silver from all of these leaders. And so she's going to betray him. Delilah said to Samson, tell me, I pray you, wherein your great strength lies, and wherewith you might be bound to afflict thee. In other words, tell me where your strength comes from, and what can I do if I ever wanted to, what's your secret? What can we do if I wanted to, let's say, tie you up and torture you or something? Tell me what it is. And if Samson was not in love with her, he would likely have seen through her wiles the way that he saw through. Remember, he told the guys, if you had not plowed my heifer, the idea of using the woman against him, he would have seen it here the way that he saw it the first time this happened. But he doesn't. He tells her. But he tells her a lie. Samson said unto her, if they bind me with 7 green withs that were never dried, then shall I be weak and be as other men. So if he knows who he's talking about. If the Philistines, if the people that would potentially want to bind and torture me were to do this is how it would happen. And this withs here, it says bind me with 7 green withs, that is the when they're twining cord together. Of course, we do it with machines now and kind of burn off the ends, and it kind of sticks it all together. But they would take the strands and they would weave it into these little cords, and then the cords would be roped together they would be bound together, wound together into rope. And then at the end of that, you would have these kind of freely hanging uh, little threads coming off the ends of the rope that they would then have to burn and whatever. Those are called the withs. And so he says, if you were to bind me with 7 green withs that have never been dried, then I shall be weak and be as another man. And so he's basically taunting her a little bit here. If you bind me with the weakest thing that you could possibly bind me with, then I will become weak. And so there's a bit of a contrast there. It's a little bit of I think Samson messing with her, obviously, to say that, you could bind me with the strongest things and I can break it real easy. But if you bind me with the weakest thing I can be bound with, suddenly I'm going to be super weak. Why that makes sense, who knows? Then the lords of the Philistines brought up to her 7 green withs, which had not been dried, and she bound him with them. So she does the very thing that Samson told her, this is going to make me weak. And it says, now there were men lying in wait, abiding with her in the chamber. So they're hiding inside the house with her. And she said unto Samson, the Philistines be upon thee, Samson. And he brake the withs, obviously, as the thread of tow is broken when it touches fire, so his strength was not known. So he easily is going to bust out. It's almost like it's not there. The way this is being described is he busts out of these withs like there's so much ash. They're just not there. And it is implied, I think, by this that the men who were waiting in the chamber all died. That they were there and, hey, the Philistines are here. Get up, Samson. So she's warning him. She's telling him. I don't know if this means that she's just testing the hypothesis, testing the thing that Samson said, but if these guys were truly there to kill Samson, you would think that she would just let him sleep. It's my opinion. It's my opinion that Delilah does have some care for Samson, so that she's at least willing to wake him up and give him a chance against these guys. So these guys all get set within her chamber, and she's like, hey, wake up, they're here. Samson is given at least some warning before they try to kill him. Because remember, when he was up on the hill, and the Israelites were like, we're going to come up there and bind you, and Samson says, okay, but don't kill me. He can be killed, even with his great strength. And so that the fact that Delilah is coming in and saying, hey, wake up, they're here, I think she does care about him to an extent. And maybe she's playing both sides of the field here, trying to get the money, but maybe also doesn't really want to see Samson die. Okay. Verse 10, and Delilah said unto Samson, behold, you have mocked me and told me lies. Now tell me, I pray you, wherewith you might be bound. Now, you would think at this point that Samson would already be waking up to the idea of, hey, she's trying to mess with me. And I think he does know this because he keeps not telling her the truth. I think he is messing with her to that extent. But then why does he eventually tell her the truth? That's the one thing. And we'll get to that when we get there. So he said unto her, verse 11, if you bind me fast with new ropes that were never occupied, then shall I be weak and be as other men. So these are ropes that nobody else has ever been bound with. These are brand new ropes. They've not been used. He says, if you bind me, I'll be as other men. Again, why is that reasonable? These guys are very superstitious. So I would imagine that's largely the reason why. But from a physical standpoint, and even from knowing kind of the background about where his strength truly comes from, this doesn't make any sense. Why would new ropes stop him, considering all the things that he's able to do? So Delilah therefore took new ropes and bound him therewith, and said unto him, the Philistines be upon thee, Samson. Again, there were liars in wait abiding in the chamber, and he brake them from off of his arms like a thread. So she's binding him. We don't know if he's awake or asleep at this time. It doesn't say in the text. We don't know if she's saying, "Hey, let's let's test it out. Can I can I bind you? Because this is a big strong dude. If he didn't want to be bound, then she's not going to be able to do it. There's no way she's strong enough. And so we don't, a lot of times in the children's booklets, we kind of see that he's asleep when this happens. Doesn't say that. Sometimes it's at night, so that kind of maybe an inference that we can make, but he's allowing her one way or the other to bind him. And then as soon as he's bound, she says the same thing. Hey, the Philistines are here. Get up. And he breaks the ropes again. And again, I think it's implied that those men died, because the Philistine leaders keep sending more to Delilah, and every time she's having to deal with the fact that Samson's lying to her. And so, verse 13, one more time, Delilah said unto Samson, hitherto you have mocked me and told me lies. Tell me where you might be bound. And he said, if you weave 7 locks of my head with the web. Talking about like the loom that you create clothing with. He's like, he's basically saying, if you take my hair and you start weaving it into a cloth, and you take 7 locks of my hair and you weave it in to this web, or to the loom, then that's what does it. So she says she fastened it with a pin, fastened his hair with a pin to the loom, and said unto him, the Philistines be upon you, Samson. And he waked out of his sleep and went away with the pin of the beam with the web. So this whole loom thing contraption is behind him, that he is bound to by his hair. And when he stands up with the Philistines, the whole contraption comes with him. And so there's this funny view of him standing up. His hair is trapped in this beam, this web thing, and he stands up with the whole thing and fights off the Philistines. And then here at the very end, she said unto him, how can you say I love you? See, now she's playing with the heartstrings, and this is where Samson falls. He allows her to manipulate him based on his love. If he had never fallen in love with her, if she was just another woman that he was using to agitate the Philistines like before, this would never have happened. But how can you say I love you when your heart is not with me? Emotional pleading gets us, guys, almost every time, right? You have mocked me these 3 times and have not told me where your great strength lies. So Samson is sitting there. 3 times he's let her do the thing. 3 times he's been attacked by Philistines. What is he thinking at this point? If I tell her the truth, she's going to do the thing. I'm going to be attacked, but I won't have my strength. I think you have here, not only is he allowing his emotions and his feelings for Delilah get in the way. I think that's obvious. That's something that's always been taught. But I think also here, you have a bit of arrogance on Samson's side. He believes he's doing the will of God with this plan. And I think this is why it works, that Delilah is able to convince him. Samson believes he is doing what is right, that God is going to be with him to take out the Philistines, because that's what God has sent him to do. Samson, his faith in God lacks understanding that God requires obedience, that God requires, if you make an oath, you hold to the oath. And Samson has done that for 20 years, but it's going to fail here because of his love for this woman. So it comes to pass, verse 16, when she pressed him daily with her words and urged him, so that his soul was vexed unto death. Okay, again, this is not something that happens overnight. She doesn't just ask the question, he tells her, and then boom. This is something that she asks and nags and nags and nags. And I think not only does he love her, but I think the nagging got to him. His soul was vexed unto death. Ladies, there's a bit of a lesson in here. And it's not, if you nag at your man, eventually he will do what you want. It's, you are vexing his soul unto death. Your nagging can lead to his destruction. So be careful. Be careful that your requests, that your um, desires for your man to do something for you does not become nagging, because it will vex his soul unto death, which is literally what happened to Samson. Verse 17, he told her all his heart. He told her all his heart. He was letting his heart, he was letting his physical desires lead. And so he gave up all the information. He basically is feeling for her and revealing everything to her because of the way he feels for her. He said unto her, and this is not everything. Obviously, if he's telling all of his heart, he's probably spouting poetry and all the things that guys do to the women that they love. But inside of that, he is telling her, and I would imagine he's even like all the stuff that has gone before. He's telling. He's telling about his birth. He's telling about his family. He's telling about the lion. He's telling about the woman at Timnah. He is telling all of his heart. But within that, he reveals his secret. There has not come a razor upon my head, for I have been a Nazarite unto God from my mother's womb. Okay? From his mother's womb. The day he was born, he has never had a razor come upon his head. If I be shaven, my strength will go from me, and I shall become weak and be like any other man. Now, again, to this Philistine woman, this probably doesn't make a lot of sense. What is it about strength that is wrapped up in your hair? Why would your hair give you strength? However, it's not about the hair. It's about the vow. Samson was said to be a Nazarite. He was a Nazarite from his parents' point of view until he was old enough to take that on for himself. And then when he became old enough to do that for himself, he maintained the vow. And so there is something here to be said about the way that a child is raised. You can raise a child in the faith from the womb. You can tell them about Jesus. You can tell them about God. You can teach to them the Bible. And from the time that they are born, and even before, because you can talk to them in the womb, you tell them these things, but there eventually comes a point where they make their faith their own. They must. They cannot go on believing what they believe because you believe it as parents. They have to make their faith their own. And we see that Samson did that. That he has been a Nazarite unto God from his mother's womb. There was a point where he chose that. Because at no point has a razor ever come to his head. At no point do we ever see him drinking wine or eating grapes or touching the vines. None of those times. There were other things that he did. He touched dead carcasses. He couldn't go through the cleansing process without touching his parents or bringing honeycomb to his parents, things like that. There were things that he did, but he never violated his Nazarite vow. That was core to his being. And so he is now, in essence, violating that vow, not by shaving his head, but by telling this woman who has obviously been trying to find his weakness and get him to be captured by the Philistines. He's telling her the secret. Because she's going to use it. She's obviously done it 3 times before, done the thing, and now he's telling her the 4th thing that is the real thing, and she's going to do the thing, and he is going to lose his strength. Also, I also see in here, when you go back up to what the Philistines told her, okay, you go back up to verse 5. Tell us where his great strength lies, by what means we may prevail against him, that we may bind him and afflict him. So they're going to bind him and they're going to torture him, but they didn't say anything about killing him. So maybe Delilah thinks that they're just going to put him in prison for a little while. They're maybe going to torture him for a little while, but maybe they're not going to kill him. So again, I think we see a little bit of a hint there that she's kind of still on Samson's side to an extent, but that's a lot of money. Okay. Verse 18. And when Delilah saw that he had told her all his heart, she sent and called for the lords of the Philistines. Okay. Here is her betrayal is complete. She realizes it, and you can kind of see the machinations in her head. 3 times now she's called Philistines to say, hey, I've done the thing that he told me to do. 3 times he's been able to break out of it. This time they're not lying in wait. When all of this is transpiring, they're not ready, probably because they're tired of sending in people and it not working. But now she realizes, hey, he's just laid it all out for me. And knowing that, she sends and calls for the lords of the Philistines, saying, come up this once, for he has showed me all his heart. Then the lords of the Philistines, this is not just the assassins, but the lords of the Philistines came up unto her and brought money in their hands. So they finally pay her. They're ready to do that. And now we see that he is asleep. She made him sleep upon her knees. Okay, so basically he's laying there on the like a couch or a divan or something like that. His head's in her lap. She's probably whispering sweet nothings and running her fingers through his hair, the thing. And he falls asleep right there. And so she calls for a man. Okay, probably one of these lords of the Philistines had a guy ready. And she waves him over and causes him to shave off 7 locks of his head. That does not mean his whole head is shaved. But the 7 locks of his head harkens back to the idea of he told her, if you bind 7 locks of my head, and the last, so they shave off 7 locks of his head, not his entire head, and she began to afflict him. So she's the one that begins the torture. She is testing it out before the men get involved. So now that he's got his head shaved in parts, she's the one that's like poking him and sticking him. We don't know with what, we don't know how she begins to afflict him, but she's testing it out. And it indeed shows that his strength has gone out from him. Because if she as a woman can torture this, guy that's been stronger than everybody, it definitely means that his strength has gone from him. And so now, having tested it, she says, hey, the Philistines are on you, Samson. He woke out of his sleep and said, I will go out as other times before and shake myself. That means he's going to go out and just threaten them and attack them and scare them and do all the things that would bring him victory. This had been the plan. And so he has that in his mind. Hey, the Philistines are here. He's kind of, I'm not awake yet or whatever. He's like, I'll just do the same thing I've been doing. And he goes out. But he did not know that Yahweh had departed from him. Why? Because his vow had been broken. Not when she shaved his head, but when he told her and gave her the means to weaken him. That's when he took an active part in breaking his vow, was when he told her, knowing that that's probably what she was going to do. And then her taking it from him, that's just an afterthought. But the Philistines took him, and they put out his eyes, and brought him down to Gaza, and bound him with fetters of brass, and he did grind in the prison house. So he's bound with metal bindings. This is not rope, this is not cord, this is metal bindings. Again, we can say that he's being brought to Gaza. Down usually means that he is going down out of the mountains. We're still, this is his birthplace, Zorah. and then Timnah is where his first betrothed was, and now we're here in the valley of Sorek, and we're probably going this direction down to Gaza. We're going down into Gaza this way, out of the mountains. It does not mean south, it means down out of the mountains. Okay. So they brought him down to Gaza and bound him with fetters of brass, and he did grind in the prison house. I mean, he was wasting away there. Howbeit, the hair of his head began to grow again after he was shaved. Okay, so they've cut these 7 locks off, and he's having an ultimate bad hair day, right? And they leave him in prison to just rot. But while he's in prison, rotting away, the hair is growing back. And then at some later date, the lords of the Philistines, the same ones that had paid Delilah, gathered them together to offer a great sacrifice unto Dagon, their god, and to rejoice. Okay, so Dagon is the big Philistine god. They have others, but Dagon is their big one. And so they're going to have this big party where they said, our God has delivered Samson, our enemy, into our hand. Now here's the big thing. Samson is a champion of Yahweh. By Samson betraying his vow and becoming weak and being captured, what the Philistines see that as is our God, Dagon, has triumphed over Yahweh. And that is a major cause for celebration in their eyes, because Yahweh has been mighty in this land. And for them to say our God has triumphed over Yahweh, very few people could attempt to make that claim. That doesn't mean that Yahweh actually was defeated. Remember, the weakness lies in Samson, not in Yahweh. Yahweh could snap his proverbial fingers and Philistine would cease to exist. Like the whole Philistine nation would just cease to exist. But he works through the agency of men, and men are fallible. They are capable of failing. And Samson did that. And so now they're celebrating this as a victory over Yahweh. Not just over Samson, but over Yahweh. But God still has a plan. During this time, Samson's hair grows back. But he doesn't have, like, there's no strength in him yet. When the people saw Samson, they praised their God, for they said, our God has delivered into our hands our enemy, and the destroyer of our country, which slew many of us. So this kind of gives us an idea over those 20 years how much havoc has Samson really wreaked against these people. And we read about the 30 that he killed. We read about 1,000 here. We're going to get a limit to that. He is only one man. We're gonna see that there's an upper limit to that. But he's vexed them for 20 years. He's caused problems for them for 20 years. And now they have gotten the upper hand. Now, I do want to say that after this, you have their God here. After this, the Philistines are not completely wiped out, but something eventually happens to their gods. And I guess the question I have for you is, do you know what happened to the gods of the Philistine? Dagon. Okay, that was horrible. But here they saw that they had this victory, and they praised their God, and it's because they thought that they had the upper hand. They're about to find out contrary to that, but this is what they think at the time. Verse 25, and it came to pass when their hearts were merry that they said, call for Samson, that he may make us sport. They're going to call him for entertainment, right? So they called for Samson out of the prison house and made him sport, and they set him between the pillars. So they mess with him. He's still weak. They mess with him. They set him between the pillars. So they've bound him between these two pillars. And Samson said unto the lad that held him by the hand, because remember, he's blind. His eyes were put out. suffer me or permit me permit me that I may feel the pillars whereupon the house stands, that I may lean upon them. Okay, so they put in between the pillars, and the boy that's leading him around shows him where the pillars are, so that now he knows where they're at. Okay. Now Samson says, "Hey, so I can lean upon them because he's weak, right? He's been made sport of. They're torturing him. He's been in prison for a while, so he is actually weak at the moment, but he is actually like he has a plan. He knows that he can call upon Yahweh and essentially repent, turn back to Yahweh, and do this one last thing." Verse 27, now the house was full of men and women, and all the lords of the Philistines were there. All the lords of the Philistines are there. So this is the entire leadership of the Philistine nation. All the lords of the Philistine were there. All of the people that paid Delilah are there. Now, we don't know that Delilah's there. There's nothing in the text that says that Delilah is there. Maybe she took her money and ran. Maybe she's still at her home. Maybe she's there at the party. We aren't told. But all the lords of the Philistines, who are the ultimate ones that tried to take out Samson, are there. And there were upon the roof. So they're in this building, but they're up on the roof of it. So if Samson takes down the pillars, the roof is going to collapse, and the people see. A lot of the times we talk about how he brings the roof down on them. They're on the roof. They're up above on the top of the building. And so it says this, there were up on the roof about 3,000 men and women that beheld while Samson was made sport. And Samson called unto Yahweh and said, O Lord God, remember me. I pray you and strengthen me. So he doesn't have his strength yet, but he's praying for it. I pray thee only this once, O God, that I may be at once avenged of the Philistines for my two eyes. So he's not asking God, let me be your champion one more time and save the Israelites from the Philistines. He's kind of already been doing that for the last 20 years. He's been keeping the Philistines away from the Israelites. Because once he started doing that, the Philistines were not really able to kind of go through Samson and rule them. But what he does ask, he's like, let me have vengeance for the eyes that they took from me. That's what he asked for. And then it says, and Samson took hold of the two middle pillars upon which the house stood, which it was borne up, the one with his right hand and the other with his left. And Samson says, let me die with the Philistines. And he bowed himself with all his might. And here's where God gives him that strength one more time. And the house falls upon the lords and upon all the people that were therein. To say that the house fell upon them, he is pulling the pillars out. The roof is collapsing. They are falling down into this house. Remember, they're up on the roof. They're falling down into it, and the walls and everything are collapsing in on them. So the dead which he slew at his death were more than they which he slew in his life. So there's our upper limit. There was about 3,000 men and women. He slays about 3,000 men and women all at once here. That means he didn't kill more than 3,000 people during the 20 years that he was a judge. And we knew he slew 1,000 at one point. But after that, not more than 3,000 altogether. So now he kills another 3,000. So he's killed almost 6,000 Philistines. That tells us that their numbers are not that incredibly large, because remember, we're talking 2 million Jews, and here Judah and Dan are suffering under these Philistines. But to keep them at bay, to keep them from harassing the Israelites, he only kills a total of about 6,000. That means that they're probably not, like, there's not that big of a military, just enough to overcome Judah and Dan, but not that big of a military if he's able to keep them off, and he's only killed about 6,000 people. Verse 31, then his brethren that is his fellow Israelites, right? And all the house of his father, so that is the his brothers, sisters, um, cousins, uncles, okay, everybody related to him, come down and took him and brought him up and buried him. And brought him up again does not mean from south to north. Brought him up means they brought him up into the hill country where Zorah is. That's where he was born, and buried him between Zorah and Eshtal in the burying place of Manoah his father. So his father is already dead. And I want to talk about this for just a minute. Going back up to verse 1, could it be that his father has died and he lost guidance? He lost that kind of steadying voice in his mind, or in his ear. And that's what led him kind of to finally go down this path. Don't know. That would be speculation. But the fact that his father Manoah is dead, and then they bury him there, I think that has something to do with it. And he judged Israel for 20 years. So that is the story, the full story of Samson. We've come to the end of it. You can let me know what you think. You may disagree with me. I know a lot of people probably will, but that's fine. We can talk about it. The objective here is to study this through, to see exactly what the text really says, and to draw meaning out of it. And if we can study what the text says and discuss it and work through it, we can come to unity in the faith based on the truth of God's word, rather than division based on traditions of men and the things that scholars have said over the years or whatever. So look forward to any questions that you may have, any comments that you might make. You can find me on social media. You can leave comments here in the YouTube video. You can find me on Facebook. I'm on Twitter, all under the Swordmaster Publications name. And all of those places, I use the same logo in all of those. So feel free to find me there. You may have even encountered this in one of those locations, because I posted on all of those places. So thank you for listening. Again, my name is Ernie Lawrence, and this has been another Swordmaster Publications presentation. We will see you next time.